Hello and welcome back to my Magic journey. Today I want to talk about my experiences going from bronze into silver. It made me aware that my deck, which I have built for bronze, was very weak in silver. That didn't come as a very big surprise to me. After all, I had only picked the game up a couple of days ago. So no matter how experienced I might be in other card games, there is a distinct lack of strong and powerful cards on top of obviously the lack of experience. However, I didn't let my losses ruin the fun for me. Instead, I've used my losses in order to examine what I was up against and how I would need to fix my game. So, one of the things that I came up with was that my deck was slow. It took a lot of time to get from the early game into my win condition. And my win condition usually consisted of, well, what did it actually consist of? I didn't really have a clear image of how I was going to win the game. Because I was either going to win the game by overpowering my enemy with a lot of weak creatures that he can't deal with, but ultimately all my creatures were very weak, so until I got toward my planeswalkers or Olivia, there was really nothing I could do about a creature with 5/5 on my enemy's battlefield. If they had a creature with 5/5, there was almost nothing I could do unless I got Olivia or Demon of Loathing or one of my planeswalkers. And that was bad. I needed to have answers, and then I needed to have stronger creatures. And it took me a long time. I was fairly certain that my deck was good at holding out against someone. I was able to drag games out even though it was clear that I was going to lose. But that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to win. The next thing I noticed was that I was not using Olivia the right way. Because you can argue that having a bunch of weak creatures and then getting them back from your graveyard is just getting a lot more weak creatures, which can't do anything against strong creatures. So while I was able to, keep myself in the game, I didn't have a way of winning it because all my creatures were too weak. And so I thought, since I don't want to switch away from Olivia, because first, I love the card, and second, I want to commit to making my own deck. Because if I just go and pick up a recommended deck for beginners, or a recommended deck that helps you climb the ladder because it's currently meta and is really strong, I will not be able to feel pride about accomplishing anything if I didn't build that deck myself. So that said, we're sticking with Olivia. And I thought to myself, we are going to have to dedicate ourselves to the reanimation feature that she brings. And upon searching throughout a bunch of cards, I found a card that fit perfectly into my playstyle. This card was Return Upon the Tide. And I immediately picked up 4 copies of it because I wanted to make sure I always had it in my deck. And I would get it on hand every single game. Because with this card, I could essentially foretell it for 2 mana and then cast it on turn 4. If I got 1 mana per turn, as long as, one of that mana is black, I would be able to foretell cast this card on turn 4. The other thing I needed in order to use this card on turn 4 was the ability to put creatures in my graveyard. And that got me to the next couple of cards that I needed. I needed cards that could allow me to discard cards and draw new ones. Because not only would that allow me to put creatures onto my graveyard, but it would also allow me to pull important cards that I needed in order to defend against my enemy. Using this method, I will be able to cast strong cards which I would otherwise have no chance of playing at turn 4. Thus, hopefully, overpowering my enemy, and then keeping this train rolling. I still don't have all the cards that I want. For example, the Prismary command, I've only gotten 1 copy of it, and I want to have at least 2. It would be more ideal to have 3 or 4, but if I want to have 3 or 4 of them, I will have to commit to blue mana a bit more than I am right now. This will then cost me more rare wildcards because I will have to buy lands that allow me to get either black or blue mana, because the majority of my deck is still black. Arguably, I do not need a lot of black, because most cards only use 1 or 2 black mana, and the other mana that they need to cast is usually generic, so you can have any. This is something that I need to look into. I am aware of the fact that perhaps I don't need to have as many swamps, and I can probably get away with a couple islands and a couple mountains as well. I just don't want to run into a situation where I need to cast a spell that needs 2 black mana, but I've only been pulling mountains and islands. So that said, we are going to have to get a few more wild cards before we can really complete this deck. But I'm going to just keep a couple of the things that I loved from my previous game, like the Reaper's Talisman and the Long Reach of the Night. I am going to keep them in my deck. I'm also going to be keeping Undying Malice, just so I have more options. Also, because I am going to be lacking counter options to spells, this is the only way I can make sure that I can thwart my enemy's attempt to simply kill my creatures. Because if they use spells to kill my creatures, while I might not be able to counter those spells, I will be able to get my creature back either way, which arguably has the same effect. Now, speaking of getting rid of creatures, I've also got rid of all my weak creatures in favor of damaging spells, which would allow me to survive through the early stages, the first 4 turns, in which I will not be able to play any creature at all with this deck. Yes, I will not be able to play any creature, because they're simply, I don't think so at least. Although, no, I do have 1 or 2 creatures which I can play on perhaps turn 3 or 2, but there's no chance I always will get them. So I will either get those creatures, or I will hopefully get some of the damage spells, which I can then use in order to protect myself from enemy creatures. And if I take a little bit of damage early on, that is really not that big of a problem, because I can just always overpower my enemy once my strategy comes to fruition. That's all I really wanted to say. Now we're just going to have to see how this deck performs. I'm having high hopes for it, but even if it doesn't perform all that well, it is still my love child, and I'm still going to try to make it work. We're just going to have to play games, get quests done, and get gold in order to buy more boosters, and hopefully get the wild cards we need, or even pull the cards we need in order to finish this deck. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you're going to be with me when we are going to look at the upcoming matches with this new deck.